This is the story of a crazy dad. Today, let's see how he calls his wife while his son goes out to play golf. Frank and his grandson arrived at the golf course, which was supposed to be a relaxing time, but he was shocked by his grandson's golf skills. Upon hearing that his grandson's performance wasn't as great as his daughter claimed, Frank realized she might be hiding a few things. In the evening, his son-in-law rushed home with takeout looking thrilled, but at the dinner table, it felt like a tense battlefield despite their lovey-dovey. The words between the grandson and son-in-law were filled with tension, with the daughter caught in the middle like a ball in a tug of war. She had to change the topic, asking Frank his plans. On hearing he'd stay a few days, she immediately made excuses. The daughter said she and her husband were too busy, and the kid needed to go to school, leaving them no time to entertain him. Frank felt disappointed, but didn't insist, saying he'd visit his other two kids. He told his eldest daughter not to tell them early. Next day, as they parted, he suggested a family photo, but the grandson refused to stand by the son-in-law. The forced smiles on their faces looked like they were shooting a comedy movie, making Frank feel somewhat awkward. Just before departing, he solemnly handed a letter to his daughter, concealing within it a question that he had suppressed for a long time. All right. Wow, even though Frank was tough on his kids when they were young, his biggest hope was just for them to be happy. On the train to his youngest son's place, he occasionally chatted with his neighbor, but found himself feeling a little less proud this time. The kids' lives weren't as great as they claimed, especially his youngest son's dream of being a conductor. When he finally saw his youngest son, all joy vanished because he was just an ordinary drummer. Their reunion should have been heartwarming, but instead it felt as distant as a glass window separating them. Frank asked his youngest son about conducting, and the son slowly said he only dabbled occasionally. In reality, his true job was as a drummer, and Frank shook his head helplessly, thinking the kid could do so much better. After years of practice, the son should aim for something greater, not live in obscurity. The youngest son thought drumming suited him better, less pressure, and decent pay. Frank felt some dissatisfaction, but understood his kid's choice. He originally wanted to stay with his son for a few days, but his plans were derailed when the son claimed he had to leave for a European gig. Frank had no choice but to prepare to leave and asked his son one last question before departing. Upon hearing a positive answer, Frank's heart felt a blend of disappointment and relief, acknowledging that there was nothing he could change about it. Leaving, he glanced back, only seeing the rebellious boy bittersweet pain. After a brief reunion, he handed his son a letter filled with fatherly love. The letter contained a father's unexpressed thoughts, while the son couldn't shake off his concern for his dad. The son secretly followed Frank to the station and told his sister to go pick him up early, feeling helpless inside. Actually, he had no gigs and didn't know how to relate to his dad after growing up. When Frank arrived at the transfer station at night, it was eerily quiet. Just as he thought the bus was near, it had left. Time difference delayed his watch by 2 hours. Fortunately, with help from the staff, Frank caught a ride on a passing truck and managed to reach the station before dawn. It was here that Frank encountered a young homeless man and, out of goodwill, tried to help him. But what a blunder it turned out to be. It unexpectedly exposed the young man's greedy nature. After over 70 years of life, he was experiencing human darkness for the first time, heartbreakingly gathering the scums. Without access to medication, Frank reluctantly called home, and the familiar voice of his wife's message filled him with warmth. In this lonely moment, his wife's voice became the best medicine for his heartache. On the train, Frank was utterly exhausted and had to swallow some pills before drifting into a deep sleep. The next day, as the train arrived, his youngest daughter, Lucy, was eagerly waiting for him like she had as a child. On the way, she told him about her grand performances over the years, and Frank felt so proud. Lucy lived in a fancy downtown apartment and had prepared a cozy room for Frank. Just as he planned to take his dad to the revolving restaurant, a friend unexpectedly dropped in. The friend eagerly explained he had an emergency and hoped Lucy could babysit his kid. Lucy happily agreed, and Frank was excitedly joyful. Lucy quietly watched as Frank tended to the child, feeling so proud, while Frank planned to take his meds and catch a bit of rest. But the phone kept ringing, and Frank intended to tell the caller to call back later, only to have the voicemail suddenly blare to life. After hearing the voicemail, Frank felt a confusing wave of emotions. Realizing he seemed to be causing his daughter some trouble, he decided to cancel the fancy dinner plan, spending time with his daughter caring for the child and enjoying a rare meal. In order to spare his daughter's feelings, Frank avoided mentioning the voicemail and simply said he had to leave after taking his meds. Before leaving, he handed Lucy a letter, but this time didn't ask if she was happy. He already knew the answer. He had to get back quickly, so he had to fly home, but unfortunately, they hit a thunderstorm on the way. The turbulence on the plane made him uncomfortable, so he went to the restroom to splash cold water on his face to wake himself up. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel.